Now with CNN legal analyst Shan Wu, defense attorney and former federal prosecutor, and CNN political analyst Sabrina Siddiqui. She's White House correspondent for The Guardian. So Shan, I suppose there's two questions here. One, legally, does Mueller have to abide by these DOJ regulations? But also, knowing what we know about Mueller being a company man, a by-the-book man, is he likely to?
That's a very good point. I think without any regulations, he's very unlikely to stray outside of what he thinks would be good for DOJ as an institution. Interestingly enough, he asked to be subpoenaed, and I think the subpoena actually places some more restrictions on him under the DOJ guidelines. As an ex-employee, if he's subpoenaed, he still has some restrictions on him, and that may be part of what his strategy was in asking for that.
Interesting.
Shan, you wrote a great piece, and you framed tomorrow as an historic opportunity to really demonstrate how a republic should work. Will it? Will he take up that opportunity?
Well, I don't know if he wants that historic role personally, but I think there's an opportunity to elicit that information from him to enlighten the American people. But it's so important how it's done. I think it's really important that the Democrats stick with what we call direct examination questions: who, what, when, and how. Yeah. If they try to use cross-examination leading questions, it's going to look A, like grandstanding, and B, he's going to completely stiff-arm them.
Yeah. Now, Sabrina, to be fair, Republicans on those committees are going to do their share of grandstanding as well. I imagine you can expect some questions on the Strzok page text, a whole host of things. But equally so there, Mueller can be unflappable, can he not, in the face of that, if they're going to be charging that, 18 angry Democrats or whatever the president's description of the Mueller investigation was.
Well, I think that Mueller is going to be very protective about the integrity of his team. And so while he is very much a cool customer, he's very straight, very, of course, middle of the road. I think if there's anything that might ruffle his feathers, it's Republicans kind of coming at him and saying this was biased, this was politically motivated, and this has all been a plot to undermine the president. So I think Republicans will have to tread carefully. They want to come off as treating this as a serious hearing, as a fact-finding mission. But as you note, these congressional hearings are known to be spectacles and partisan theater, and that's why it's so, I think, important to see what actually comes out of this when you have public opinion very much baked in terms of how the American public perceives the Mueller report.
And that's why he really doesn't like this. I mean, he's been up there over 80 times over his career testifying before Congress, and he loathes having to do this. A reluctant witness is putting it lightly. I thought Democratic Congressman and presidential candidate Tim Ryan was interesting last night. Here's what he told Aaron Burnett about this.
If he does stay in the confines of the report, which I'm assuming he will, it may not move the needle.
And the question for Democrats then becomes, Sabrina, if it doesn't move the needle, if that polling doesn't change significantly to get the majority of the American public in the camp of impeachment, what do Dems do?
Well, that's the key question that they're grappling with, because at the moment, public opinion is not broadly on the side of impeachment, and that's the case House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has been making to her caucus. You have roughly a third of House Democrats who've called for a formal impeachment inquiry. Now, it's notable that the last time there was a flurry of Democrats who came out in favor of impeachment, it was after Robert Mueller made that one and only public statement he has made thus far, kind of reaffirming his principal findings from the report. It's very different to have him really detail these 10 episodes of potential obstruction of justice by the president before the cameras, under oath, that could have some impact. But I do think that Democrats are really going to have to look at whether they're going to make a decision that's based on the political climate, or if they feel like this is their congressional responsibility to carry out oversight of the executive branch.
Okay, Shan, so forget Bob Mueller's discomfort. Also forget the DOJ instructions to him. There's a very legitimate question here that was left unclear by the public report, and that is, was it DOJ policy preventing an indictment of a sitting president, or a lack of evidence that held the special counsel from recommending an indictment, right? I mean, that's a fair question that requires clarification, is it not?
It does. And he tries to clarify it in the report, but I'm hoping if one thing comes out of his testimony, it's to clarify for the American people that they felt they could not charge a sitting president because of the DOJ rules, not lack of evidence.
It's a direct question, is it not? Right. Was there enough evidence, or was it the policy? Shouldn't he have an obligation to answer that question?
I think he should, although if he's asked, was there enough evidence, I think he's going to say, we just couldn't make that decision, was there enough evidence? But I think if he's asked, did DOJ policy prevent you from reaching that charging decision, he ought to say yes.
Well, that would
Jim
clear
should
up,
be there
that would clear up
asking
a
the
lot.
question.
I mean,
He
let's
would
see if it
answer.
gets asked. If anybody's listening now, please ask that question for the sake of the American people. Shan, Sabrina, thanks very much,
guys.
as always. Our special coverage, we should note,